Mike, good morning. Walk us through this new rule. How is it put into play?
Well, an expansion of replay was necessary in the aftermath of the NFC Championship game. There had been talk about expanding replay for pass interference, roughing the passer, and illegal contact with defenseless players. But at the end of the day, the coaches got together and pushed and pushed and pushed for change. There was an element among ownership that did not want the change, that believed that what happened in the Rams-Saints game was a 100-year storm that wasn't going to happen again for another 100 years. But the coaches engineered this process and got the owners on the same page, and now what we have is pass interference, whether called or not called, offensive or defensive, will be subject to replay review like any other thing that is subject to replay review. Coaches challenge in the normal course of the game, booth review triggered in the final 2 minutes of the game or in overtime, and presumably on scoring plays as well. They haven't specifically said that, but I assume that that's exactly how it will work. And now if there is an egregious violation, it's got to be egregious. You know, they call it a judgment call, but pass interference sometimes involves a very poor exercise of judgment, and we all see it, just like we saw it in that Rams-Saints game. So now there's a way to fix what happened in that game, and most importantly, to prevent it from happening again.
Okay, is egregious your word, or is that the NFL's word? Because that's open to interpretation of what's egregious.
Well, egregious is my word, but that's an interpretation of the standard that the NFL uses for replay review. It has to be a clear and obvious error based upon the available visual evidence. And we've heard different labels applied over the years, indisputable visual evidence and et cetera. They've tried to simplify that to clear and obvious. That's the standard we've heard in recent years. But, you know, it's a guy getting wiped out before the ball arrives.
Yeah.
That's the kind of clear and obvious that we're looking for. And I think we'll find out in practice that they're not going to overturn these calls where there's hand fighting or ticky-tack or something that isn't clear and obvious. And look, it's going to be for the league office to implement it. It's going to be for Al Riveron, who still has the authority to make these decisions, to come up with a standard approach. But I think the NFL, and we saw it last year with the catch rule, the NFL became very vigilant in only overturning calls if there was clear and obvious visual evidence, and I think that's what's going to be required here.
All right, then take me through how we would use this rule this year, last year with the Saints. So that play happens, there's pass interference, clear pass interference, and there is no flag. Who initiates the review?
Well, if it was more than 2 minutes left in the game, and I frankly can't recall whether or not it was more than 2 minutes left, but you'd have to have a red flag available. You'd have to have a timeout available if there was more than 2 minutes left in the game, so you could challenge that. If it's less than 2 minutes, then what happens is the replay assistant would hit the button and trigger the process, and it would have been overturned because it was clear after further review that Nickel Roby-Coleman wiped out Tommy Lee Lewis before the ball got there. That's the kind of play that would be overturned. But again, if it's more than 2 minutes left in the game, you've got to have a red flag left. You've got to have a timeout to burn if you get it wrong. If it's less than 2 minutes or if it's an overtime, then you automatically get that consideration.
And are you going to have somebody looking at replay in the stadium, or is it going to be sort of in the central intelligence office of the NFL?
You've always got the replay assistant, Dan, who is in the stadium, who makes that initial call to trigger the process when it doesn't fall within those situations where a coach can throw the red challenge flag. But the final decision will continue to be made by either Al Riveron or one of his lieutenants at the league office. They've got 2 or 3 guys there who can do it because 1 o'clock Eastern on a Sunday when there's 9 or 10 games going on, there's a chance there's going to be 2 or 3 of these reviews at once. But it's still going to be a decision made at the league office.
What problems do you see with this?
Well, I mean, the Hail Mary is the one that most people are already pointing to because now all you have to do is fire the ball down the field. If, you're down by 1 score or less in the final moments of the game, you just heave it up for grabs and you hope that maybe there's going to be some sort of evidence that someone got wiped out before the ball came in. I think back to the Hail Mary play from 2012 between the Seahawks and the Packers, the one that ended the lockout of the officials because there was clear pass interference by Golden Tate before he caught that pass. But you know what? If it is clear, it should be overturned. And they can worry all they want about pass interference on a Hail Mary, but if it's there to address clear and obvious errors, then so be it. I mean, we all want to have satisfaction that these games are being decided by the players, not by bad calls from the officials. And, Dan, this is such a critical thing the NFL did, because as more and more states have legalized gambling, more and more politicians are going to get involved when there are these controversies, and they're going to say, hey, on behalf of my constituents who are wagering their hard-earned money on these games, we want this to all be on the up and up, and we don't like these officiating flaws that can lead to corruption and another Tim Donaghy type of a situation. So I think it was smart for the NFL to get ahead of this as we get, toward a dozen states, and there's going to be 20, there's going to be 30, there's going to be 40 that have legalized gambling in the coming years.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.